we're going to talk some Auburn football. We got Kyle Loomis on the line from E2C Network. Hey, Kyle.
Good to see you, Mark. Thanks again for inviting me, and happy to talk about some Auburn football. It's almost here. Saturday is A-Day game.
That's right. And so I'm glad that you showed up for that very reason. Always glad that you show up for these conversations. So, Kyle, exactly that. We only had one spring game this past weekend. We've got a glut of games coming up, but the most notable one is Auburn. And I believe that you can watch that game if you have the SEC Network Plus,
I
which you
believe
can
that's
get
true.
online.
Yeah, I believe that's true. And that may be the best way to watch this thing, because let me just tell you, folks, you better be committed to coming to watch this A-Day game, because it is supposed to downpour the entire
Uh-oh.
time. Yeah, and it's a bit of a disappointment, because obviously there's this somewhat of a renewed excitement of Hugh Freeze being here and something new, something fresh, something to get excited about. He's also confirmed that they're planning on trying this new scoring format. I won't call it a new for like college football, but just new for Auburn fans. And there's plenty of other things going around. They usually make a big weekend out of it in Auburn, do other things. There's a Frank Thomas statue going up, who did play Auburn football. People didn't know that. The famous baseball player once played tight end for Auburn football. A lot of that going on. So my advice to you is this: if you can get to Auburn, get there and come be a part of it. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I don't blame people that may want to take advantage of that SEC Network Plus option and watch it from the comfort and dryness of their homes.
So I think I'm safe on being able to watch the game. I looked into this the other day because I just wanted to make sure. So I've got ESPN, I've got cable. Now it's not going to be on your cable system, but you can just jump online and you've got the extension in terms of your cable package online. And I should be able to just, yes, from the comfort of my home, I'm going to take in the Auburn A-Day game. Is there any talk about, sometimes in these weather situations, they have it pinpointed pretty well that, okay, the weather's going to hit at roughly noon. So why don't we move it to 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or vice versa? It's going to hit later in the
Right.
afternoon. So why don't we, move it earlier in the day to let everyone get here, enjoy the game, and be able to clear campus?
I'm sure there are, people that make those decisions that have already started planning those things out. The problem is, as I've already addressed, so much going on with the Frank Thomas statue unveiling. There's not a lot of wiggle room that day to move things around without them kind of, getting on top of each other. There's a baseball game schedule that's already been adjusted. So it's going to get challenging. Obviously, they know most people are coming for this game. So, that's going to take priority. I could see them maybe potentially moving it up or back an hour or something like that if it really was that bad and he thought it was going to be affected. But I'm not privy to anything being changed at this point. If it wasn't for the busyness of the rest of the day and the weekend, you might see something like that, in my opinion.
So my enjoyment of the Auburn spring game is going to be up to the individuals who present it, because this is how I look at these spring games. I don't know that we can gather a whole lot from the actual action on the field.
Right.
That always has to be taken into context. Okay, the offensive line just opened this enormous hole and this running back just shot out for 40 yards. Okay, well, is
It's
that
fun.
because the offensive line's really good or the defensive line's,
Right.
and then just obviously the intensity level can only be to a certain level. The complexity of the schemes, if anything, it hit me the other day that there may be less validity to these scrimmages that get televised than the ones that don't, because the coaches, when no one's around, will of course employ the more exotic schemes, and they want to keep it straight vanilla for the fans, not the fans, but for everybody else, opponents, rivals that can watch the game. So from that standpoint, there's something, you know, taken away from the competition.
Yeah, you brought it right there, hitting the nail on the head. This is kind of the conundrum of spring games. First of all, from the fans' perspective, yes, we just saw a humongous hole opened up and we just went on a 50-yard touchdown run. Great, but then well, that was our defense that we did that on. So you don't really know what to make of that as a fan. So there's always that kind of element. I'll get to something else with that Coach Hugh Freeze brought up in his press conference yesterday. But I would also say that Hugh Freeze did mention he wants to temper expectations for the Auburn fans, stressing that it's going to be somewhat vanilla in the sense that we don't want to show our cards. We're going to be televised. And outside of that, there's going to be people that are closely watching in the stands. I'm not saying that there's spies out there in the stands or anything like that, but you would be an idiot if you weren't sending someone out there just to get an opinion of what the team looks like if you are an SEC opponent or something like that. It's open to everybody. Everybody can get in. But regardless of all that, obviously it can get a little bit monotonous at times outside of maybe like a really big, strong quarterback battle, which Auburn kind of has, but it doesn't feel as exciting as the last couple of years. The interesting thing for me, though, that I really like that Coach Hugh Freeze talked about yesterday was this concept of actually playing a legitimate game for the spring game. And he's not talking about Auburn versus Alabama, Auburn versus Georgia in the spring game, because obviously that's not going to happen. It's just not how the world works. But he was advocating, and apparently he did this during his time at Ole Miss, for just a game with a Troy. If people don't know who Troy is, it's a little school south of Auburn. Sometimes it has a big win every once in a while. I think they did pretty good this past year. But if that's not familiar enough for you, let's throw out a UAB or something like that. Most people know UAB out of Birmingham. Auburn versus UAB in a spring game. That way, it just kind of does a couple things here. It provides more interest for the fans because it's an actual opponent you're playing against, somebody with the obviously idea that Auburn's probably going to win that 9 times out of 10. It limits your chances of injuries in your spring game by about 50% because you're not using everybody, even though you would like to get some reps. And that's theoretical, but just in concept alone. So those two things right there are good enough reasons to try it, in my opinion. But what I loved for his suggestion was, let's get a charity to take this on, and we can raise money for this charity. All the proceeds, or a certain amount, goes toward that, and make it a big state by state thing. And obviously an Alabama thing, you rotate every few years. Auburn does UAB, then South Alabama, then Troy, then whoever else wants to get in the mix. Jacksonville State. Of course, we know the Crimson Tide won't ever do that. They hardly ever play anybody out of the state outside of Auburn because they're scared. We can go into that some other time if you'd like. But that was the concept that he presented yesterday in his press conference that he would like to advocate for, but he feels like, and this was his quote, that he's the only one interested in that right now. So it seems like a pipe dream, but I love that concept.
I like it too from the entertainment standpoint and just the intrigue of watching an actual game and watching a different opponent and not watching a team take on itself, of course, for the very reason that we just outlined, a 50-yard touchdown run. And how do you really look at that versus, okay, the 50-yard touchdown run came against a pretty decent UAB team, and therefore we can more evaluate what's going on. I would be concerned with, well, yes, you would think that the injury factor would be limited and theoretically cut in half because you have half the players playing at any one time for every play. You would also think that the intensity level would be increased. Now, some football coaches would tell you that in some ways decreases the propensity for injuries. It wouldn't seem like it would, but then it could be argued that the intensity of the game could cause some injuries. Other than that, there is a potential embarrassment factor of losing that. If Auburn comes away with a win, nobody bats an eye, regardless of what the score is. Nobody's concerned. Nobody raises an eyebrow. But if they lose that, even though it doesn't count, it doesn't matter. There's going to be all sorts of feedback given to the Auburn football.
Well,
property.
And that's no different than the feedback you get from the spring game. We've got people who, they say they played a little ball and they can see and make these hardcore analysis of a spring game. When the coach already has primed you and prepped you, you're not going to see a whole lot in this. Don't make strong. I forget what his exact quote was, but essentially it was, you're not going to see a lot of substance in this. So don't walk away with strong opinions about this. And I love the candidness that Coach Hugh Freeze is approaching that with. I think he's doing that just in general about a spring game, but because of where Auburn football's roster is at right now. According to him, outside of one or two key injuries, we're pretty healthy, and he's able to do this new format of where you give the defense a certain amount of points and then let the offense try to catch up to them throughout the game. So it makes it a little bit more interesting as opposed to this, you score or you pick up a fumble, you get 2 points or something like that. Nobody can follow that. It gets all types of confusing. I do like the fresh takes that Hugh Freeze is bringing to the table in terms of just trying to make some interest about this spring game right now. So I hate that this weather may play a factor in that, because I think it could have been a really exciting and will be an exciting A-Day to some respect, depending on how excited you actually get about a spring game.
And Kyle, the reason I said that the people that might be most responsible for my interest and my takeaway from this game are the broadcasters and the production team is that at one point these games used to be, and I put games in quotes, these games used to be broadcast like they were football games.
Right.
And you quickly determine, okay, it's not that critical that they convert this 4th and 3 play. This is not, Auburn, LSU in the middle
Right.
of November. So the TV networks have caught on to this at some point, and I think they've generally done an outstanding job of presenting this more as this is a preview of the 23 season. This is our look at the team. We're going to talk to various people. We're going to catch the coach. We're going to catch the coordinators. We're going to talk to various people around the football program. We're going to talk about position battles. We're going to talk about, transitions and during the off season and additions to the coaching staff. We're going to present a TV show about the football program. And I think that that's the way to go. And that's where I've gained the most from these spring games the last few years.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. I think you obviously need to figure out what's the best way to present this, because if you present it as this thing is important and then you realize you didn't pick up that 3rd down, like you said, and nobody's really super disappointed about it, well, it doesn't really play well on TV. So yeah, I think it's all about how you present it. And if that's the way that they've been transitioning and have transitioned, I think that's a smart move on their part. I think honestly too, the excitement really is only towards the fan base that this team is actually about. You're not going to have, let's just say, Auburn and LSU fans tuning in to this game all at the same time, focused in on all their interest on this particular. It's just going to be the Auburn fan base, and we are very wide and far-reaching, almost to some people's annoyance at times with how much we yell War Eagle at each other and stuff. But yeah, you're playing to an Auburn audience, so you got to kind of shift the ways you present it with that as well. So a preview is a good way to look at it. Obviously, everyone shifts their mind to the quarterback battle. Nothing really super definitive there, other than Robbie Ashford has been dealing with a little bit of injury, but has since kind of gotten a little bit almost full speed, is what he said there. It's been very hit or miss with the quarterbacks the entire spring, as you might expect. One week it's TJ Finley's doing good, and the next week it's Holden Gerner. Who was effectively the 3rd string, is doing better. It would be interesting to see if Robbie had been healthy this entire spring, how that might have changed things. So that will be obviously a point of interest for most fans there. What stuck out to me yesterday when he was asked about the tight ends, this is just my interpretation of it, he really kind of lit up about that. And that's odd, because if you remember from previous conversations, we lost arguably one of the best tight ends we've had in our history, just in terms of length of time he's been there and what he's accomplished during that time. John Samuel Shanker, he's gone. But there's a room here that is full of guys that have been playing behind him that are very tenured. Experienced, you can kind of debate on, because John Samuel Shanker took up most of that time there, but they've experienced in terms of being in on plays, being blockers, and getting some balls thrown to them as well. There's also Rivaldo Fairweather, who is a transfer brought in from FIU this year. And it feels like every press conference he's either asked about or brought up by the coaches. And so that really excites me. And you would think that all the attention would be on quarterbacks, that it would be on running backs with the departure of Tank Bigsby. And I will add this too, since I brought that up. Coach Hugh Freeze said yesterday that he believes Jarquez Hunter is the best running back he has ever coached. Now, let me give you one caveat. And he said this himself, that he hasn't had a lot of, he said, great ones. And he said he's had a lot of good running backs, but big names that he's coached. But still, the fact that he just stepped right out there and says Jarquez Hunter is the best running back he's ever coached. Those were the two big things. The way he talked about the tight end room and the way he was very complimentary of Jarquez, which shouldn't surprise Auburn fans, but it was interesting to hear that phrase put with that running back.
All right, that's going to have me scurrying to Ole Miss's 2013, 14, 15 rosters in that range. He produced a couple really good top 10, top 15 teams in the country, but names are not coming to mind right
Jordan
this
Wilkins.
second.
Jordan Wilkins is one.
Yes, there's one. I was going to say, as soon as I see the roster, I'll be like, oh, yeah. And that's one name right there. Yes. He was a really good one. Yeah.
So he doesn't have a long history of, again, he was very careful to say not great running backs, not saying they weren't good, but just that's not what he's been known for. Maybe been more known for his quarterback, some of his bigger wide receivers, Laquan Treadwell, you throw out there, Evan Ingram, things like that, which should excite Auburn fans because that's one area that we've been lacking in terms of production. We've had good wide receivers. If you followed Auburn's pro day, you saw how talented Shedrick Jackson was and that how skilled, athletic he is. Maybe just wasn't utilized properly over the last 4 or 5 years that he's been here. Feels like it's been longer than that. So you can look at that a couple different ways. This guy said the best running back he's ever seen, but he hasn't had a lot of great running backs. Or you can choose to say, well, this is a coach that recognizes what he has. And we've seen, there was a moment last year, not a very, in my opinion, educated moment, but where the Auburn fandom as a collective was starting to ask the question, was Tank Bigsby should he be the second string running back to Jarquez Hunter? There are some other things that played into that, and obviously that didn't really get any legs behind it, but that's how talented this guy is. So I think he will be Auburn's bread and butter this year, getting established and then letting that passing game, that quarterback game catch itself back up. So be excited, Auburn fans, because your coach is really excited about his running back.